The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
It's right about time again to swerve again, confuse the general fans again. Add another swerve and then...
Oh shit! It's Vince Russo!
Vince McMahon's best kept secret.
I am the Antichrist of professional wrestling!
David Arquette won the world title!
I've got a wife, 3 kids at home, and I really don't need this shit.
How can this show be so awful, Mr. McMahon? I didn't think it was.
Viagra on a pole match.
And Hogan, you big bald son of a bitch, kiss my ass!
Judy Bagwell on a forklift match.
McMahon, the family, the Rock, they screwed us all.
Now you're the editor, right?
Mankind did it.
Jumpy, beat.
Goldberg steered Russo out of the cage.
I'm from New York.
I'll get downright nasty.
This is Vince Russo's The Brand.
Listen, one of the things I've been trying to do is I've been trying to make new friends because there's a lot of people that don't like me. And quite frankly, I don't know why people don't like me. I mean, my dog likes me, my family likes me, but there are a lot of people that don't like me. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to become friends with new people. And you know, I'm going through places like Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. And I'm looking at nice people and interesting people and people that have a following, because what I'm figuring is, if I buddy up with these people, then maybe I'll get the good guy rub. You know, in wrestling, they call it the rub. So I'm hoping to get the good guy rub from my next guest, who's got a very, very, very impressive resume. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him and about the resume. His name is Sam Roberts, and you can hear him daily on the Sam Roberts Show, which you can hear on Opie Radio on Sirius Radio, which everybody knows I'm a huge fan of. He also does a wrestling podcast, the Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast on iTunes. He has a huge YouTube channel. And here's the thing. This is where I really got to rub elbows with him, because you know they all hate me over there. But he's got a reoccurring role on the WWE Network on such shows as Countdown and The List. So let me introduce to you who I hope to be my new friend, Mr. Sam Roberts. Mr. Roberts, how you doing today?
I'm good, but I just hope that the reverse doesn't happen and I don't become one of Russo's guys.
Bro, I'm going to warn you right now, and like I should put the warning up on the screen before the show starts. Now, there is a chance you may walk away from this interview with Vince Russo heat, Sam. I got to let you know that up front.
All right, well, if I have to deal with it, I have to deal with it. You know, I like to make new friends too, so we'll just see.
I will see. Now, Sam, let me tell you a couple things that come to mind now that I have you here face to face. You remind me, and I'm sure you've gotten this, you remind me of one of my favorite artists, somebody who I think has one of the greatest voices in the world. I've seen him many, many times. Have people told you that you look like the great Art Garfunkel?
Yeah, and I like that you qualify that, so it's like not an insult.
No, not at all.
But I don't think that you're comparing my voice or my singing ability to Art Garfunkel.
No, well, listen. If you wanna, hum a few verses of, Sounds of Silence, I'm cool. I am a huge fan of Art Garfunkel. But now, listen, you kind of took a shot there at your looks. But Sam, I would have to think you got a very unique look. The Afro thing you got going on, I would have to think that's a chick magnet.
It is. I'm married. But I'm married to a girl way out of my league, and I don't think it would have happened. You know, it helps, as you know, having a microphone in front of you. So I think if I didn't have a microphone in front of me, if I didn't have an audience, if I didn't have a unique look, I think I'd have a lot more trouble. I don't know what it is with the female mind, but you can get in there. Once you can get into that brain, You could trick him into doing anything.
Yeah, but Sam, I don't think you tricked anybody into anything. I've watched some of your shows. Listen, Sam, I say this all the time. I'm a guy from New York. I'm not the sharpest knife in a drawer. I'm not polished by any stretch of the imagination. I've watched your show, bro. You're a very intellectual, individual. I would have to think that's a part of the appeal to get the hot wife.
It is definitely a part of the appeal. And I think that, I have to be able to maintain a conversation because the amount of wrestling that she's aware of, because it's just so prevalent in my life, means that the other side of the coin, I have to be a smart person because otherwise I'm just a dumb wrestling fan, and that's going to be tough.
Well, Sam, I got to ask you this because I know I purposely did this. Not only my time in the business, but still today. I purposely kept my wife away from wrestling, and I never talked about it at home. I never brought it up. It was like this separate world that I just went away to and was a part of. Do you purposely try to keep it away from your wife, or is she just not a fan and it's not really what you have in common?
I don't keep it away from her, and part of that is because she doesn't like that. She doesn't like the separation, and so I kind of bring her in, and I don't lay it on as thick as I would if she were a fan, but she does enough where she gets to know the product. She knows who everybody is. She knows what the basic storylines are. She knows the big events in history because I talk about it, and I also have a distance. I probably get as close to wrestling as one can get without actually working in the business. You know what I mean? It's not. I don't go into the bubble. I still stay right outside, right on the edge of the bubble without going all the way in. I think if I went in and it became that thing, then I would probably try to keep her out of it. You know what I mean?
Now, let me ask you a question because you say something very, very interesting, Sam. I've referred to it for years as the wrestling bubble because things don't happen in the real world like they happen in the wrestling bubble. They just don't. But Sam, I got to ask you this question, and I don't just want to talk about wrestling because there's so many other fascinating things about you I want to talk about. But I have to ask you this since we're on the subject. Have you made it a point to not step into that bubble? In other words, if there were an opportunity, and I'm sure there's been opportunities, bro. You're a talented guy. Have you purposely not stepped into that bubble is what I'm getting at?
I wouldn't say I've purposely not stepped in. I've been careful about choices, and there are some choices I've made where I could have gone a little further in, and I decided not to. If the right opportunity came around, I'm sure I would take it, and it'd be difficult not to. But I also always thought that it was valuable to me, to my psyche, to my future, to everything, to have one foot firmly planted in the kind of mainstream real world. Because once you go into that wrestling world, all you can really do is talk to that audience because you're right. It's the wrestling bubble is this thing that exists where people who are on the outside of it will just never understand it. And I want to be able to talk to people both in and outside of the bubble. And I don't think you can do that from in.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Sam, and one of the things on my list to talk about with you, but I've been trying to make that transition, and I've been really trying to break away. And Sam, listen, I'm going to tell you why. And bro, I got to be honest with you, man. I think obviously I have some heat with the WWE because, bro, I'm the kind of guy, I'm not going to sit here and put them over if they don't warrant me as a wrestling fan / television fan putting them over. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not the guy waiting for Vince McMahon to call for the last run. I have an audience, and part of my audience is they pay money for my opinion, so they're always going to get an honest opinion. So, I have heat, I think, with the WWE now because I don't necessarily say a lot of things that, I think they're thrilled to death with. But, I myself have been trying to make that transition over into the real world and the entertainment world. Because, Sam, I got to be honest with you, looking at trends, the television audience in wrestling has gone down, in droves, since the Attitude Era in 1999. Now, of course, we can all talk about there are different ways to watch the show with social media. We could talk about there are more programming. There are more programming choices available to us. But the fact of the matter is, I think wrestling today is playing more to a niche audience than the casual audience back in the day when I was writing, which is a reason for business purposes why I don't think I can afford to just hitch my wagon to the wrestling business, because I see the piece of the pie shrinking. Now, how long exactly, Sam? I know you've been a wrestling fan for a long time. When did you become interested in it?
Forever. I mean, when I was as long as I can remember. Like I'm as old as WrestleMania is. So I'm 32 now. By the time it's WrestleMania 33, I'll be 33. The first storylines that I remember getting sort of conscious of was WrestleMania 7. So that's when I was 7, and that's probably when you start to remember stuff like that. But, I don't remember not watching wrestling. I don't remember what made me start. I just remember it always kind of being there. But that's when the Hogan Slaughter story is the first sort of beginning, middle, end story that I can remember being aware of.
Now, Sam, here's where I'm interested. A guy that goes back that far, and obviously, Sam, I'm a lot older than you. I'm 55. I started watching wrestling in the early 70s. And, bro, this is an absolute shoot with me. If I turned on wrestling for the first time today, I don't think I would be a wrestling fan. The product I'm watching today is not a product I grew up on. As a kid with Bruno, through the WrestleMania era, through the Attitude Era, it's just different. But from what I read about you, and I'm interested to hear this, because I feel bad. I feel bad that I'm not the fan of wrestling that I used to be. And I'll be honest with you, Sam, to me, it's all about the effort. And I'm not talking about the boys. I think wrestlers as a whole, when they're in that ring, whether it's 5 people or 5 million people, they'll bust their ass. But to me, the boys don't write the show. And, coming from the creative aspect that I came from, when I watch today's show, I just don't see the same effort being put in. I see a lack of effort. And that kind of pisses me off, and it turns me off to wrestling. But I kind of get the feeling that you've remained a wrestling fan, like at the same level you've always been, which is cool to me, because I want to ask you, like, how have you maintained that when I think wrestling has changed over the years?
I think it's definitely changed. And I feel, and I've thought about that before too, because I'll have, like, while I'm watching the show, while I'm watching Raw, I'll have these feelings, like, I'll take it personally if something is done that I'm like, oh, that could have been better. Like, why don't do that to me? I almost feel like wrestling has become my wife, where you got to stick with, like, you stick with it through the times where you're not sure if it's working, because it's going to get better. That's the way a relationship works. That's the way a marriage works. And I feel like that's what I cling to. And I look back and I try to, I like having the network, and I have, I was a tape trader in high school, so I had all the footage before then anyway. But I like looking back at old stuff so I could think to myself, am I looking back at it with a nostalgic lens, or am I looking back at it saying, this was better then? And, like, to me, like, I loved the stuff in, like, 92, 93, 94. And I look back and watch it now, and it was a mess. But it was because I was a kid. Like, that's when I look at it and I go, okay, that's nostalgia that I'm thinking of. When I watch, I go back and watch, like, stuff from 98, 99. And this isn't to blow smoke, but that's the stuff where I'm going, you're right, because I'm a story guy. I'm not I'm a guy who, I think that whether people admit it or not, the only reason people watch wrestling, that's what grabs them, is the stories. And I was talking, I think I had Stone Cold on my podcast. I think it was the 99 Rumble where that's the one where Vince won. I think it was.
I think so. Yeah.
And that was the one, like that to me was what I still wish wrestling was, because there were so many through lines going throughout that one Royal Rumble match. Like you had, I mean, probably half a dozen stories being told as the Rumble match went on. You had Vince and Austin over here, and Kane's coming out here, and he's going through the crowd to do this. And like there were just ways that were figured out to tell different stories throughout one match, and it was this through line, and it was great, and it gave you this feeling of depth that you sometimes don't get now. I think since the draft has happened, that feeling of depth, and it's only been 3 weeks, so it's tough to say, but there is more depth to the shows. There are more stories being told, and you're seeing how they're connected, and it's not quite as predictable as to how that's going to be told. But yeah, I mean, when I'm watching a 3-hour show and there's really only one story being told throughout the 3-hour show, and it's the same one as last week and the week before, it does get a little like, come on, guys, like let's really do something here.
And bro, I'm not going to get you. I want to make this perfectly clear. I'm not getting Sam any heat with the WWE. All these opinions are Vince Russo opinions. I want to make that perfectly clear. But Sam, I got to tell you, I really get pissed off. Like when they ask Triple H questions about, wrestling then and wrestling now. And, he uses the phrase, it's a different time. And that pisses me off because I don't know what that means, Hunter. Like, does that give you the license to write a shitty show because it's 20 years later? So, yeah, it is a different time, bro. But I don't understand. Here's what I'm getting at, Sam, you talk about storytelling. I just did, we have a show called on Podcast One, Raw Now and Then, where we look at a show from the Attitude Era and then we compare it to modern day Raw, okay? You'll remember this because this was very memorable. We just looked at the episode where Vince fired Austin at the pay-per-view. Right. Austin came back and Vince just peed his pants.
Love it.
Okay. Now here's the thing. This is where I get pissed off with the don't tell me it's a different time bullshit. Okay. I'm going to compare that story to the Rollins I don't want to say Lion King, the Demon King story. They told the story over 2 hours because they blew it off. I don't know why they didn't milk that to the end. I don't know. I don't write the show. But my point is, Sam, there were three pre-tapes in the back. Seth opened up the show outside. He was looking in the hall for the Demon King. He ran into Neville. And then the last scene in the office with Mick Foley and Stephanie, who, by the way, have been standing in the same exact place for the last 6 months. But now let's go back, Sam, to the McMahon pissing his pants story. Mm-hmm. Sam, in those same 2 hours, guess how many pre-tapes there were in the back?
How many?
17.
17?
17. Now, now, when Hunter says it's a different time, what does that have to do with writing 17 episodes to keep the audience there and interested and never going to change the channel with 3 very generic scenes that literally like a 10-year-old child could have wrote? I don't find the connection with it's a different time. And that's when I'm harsh on them, Sam, because I'm harsh on the effort. That's what I'm harsh on. And here's what I have a problem with, Sam. I would understand you have a show, on Opie Radio. You got your wrestling show. Sam, when you walk away from each and every show, don't you want to say, by God, that was the very best show I could have put on?
Yeah. And I think that the different time argument, see, it's 2 different arguments. And I think that it has to be acknowledged that like it's a different time in the sense that you can't do what you did in Attitude Era because Attitude Era was also a reflection of the culture. And I think wrestling has to be a reflection of the culture, meaning,
Absolutely.
you know, Howard Stern, Jerry Springer, the whole deal, Beavis and Butthead. I think that the culture we live in, for better or worse, I think worse, is far more sensitive, is far more nice, doesn't want nudity, doesn't want cursing, and wants it to be a little more family friendly. So I'm fine with the idea of PG, family friendly. That said, now that we've figured out, okay, what are the confines that we're in, now it's time to go to work and figure out how to tell a story in those confines. So I think that he's right when he says it's a different time, and you can't, like, you couldn't do Austin holds a gun to Vince McMahon's head. That's what you can't do. But what you can do is, you're right, take the story that's being told where it's Seth Rollins looking for the Demon King and add something with a little bit of juice to it, something that hooks you, like, oh, that's different. You can still be different, right? You just can't be vulgar, violent, whatever it is. But there, yeah, you're right in the sense that you can still be different, and you still need to push yourself. And maybe it's a little more difficult now, and I think it is more difficult now, but you still need to push yourself to tell compelling stories. And, you know, all TV has had to figure out how to do that. And some TV is doing it great. Lots of cable shows have figured out how to do it in ways that are amazing, you know?
Yeah. Well, Sam, let me ask you this. I mean, obviously you're a student of the game. You're a big wrestling fan. You know, say, for argument's sake, tomorrow you're given the book. Okay. What is the very first thing you go in there and do? If tomorrow Vince McMahon says, you know, Sam, carte blanche, whatever you want to do, I'm going to sign off on. What's the very first thing you do coming from a fan's perspective?
Well, I think I would try to make, if I had carte blanche, it would be philosophical changes in the sense that we're going to start investing fully in characters, meaning, you know, we're not going to start investing in one, and then because there's a shiny new toy, we're going to push that down and let the new toy come, because nothing develops that way. Like, to me, I think that the biggest missed opportunity has been all the stops that they've put on Bray Wyatt. Because I think, like, that's a character that, you know, you don't have to skyrocket him to the main event of anything immediately, but I think you had this moment with him where it was all good up until the Royal Rumble match that he had with Daniel Bryan that year, the year that Daniel Bryan ended up going to WrestleMania. But that Royal Rumble match, I think, was very telling, because as mad as the fans were that Daniel wasn't in the Rumble, they weren't mad at the Bray Wyatt match when Bray beat him clean, because it was so good and because Bray was convincing in that victory. So I think I would take a guy like that, and actually create something where there's a reason to be afraid of this guy, and there's a reason to believe that he does have the capability of taking over the world, you know, and because now it's gotten to the point where he says, follow me. And as a fan, you go, you know, it's just, I don't know why anybody would follow that guy, because, you know, sometimes he wins, sometimes he loses. There's no, it's just kind of there.
Yeah. I said this all the time, like, you know, having worked with Taker, God, there's no reason why Bray Wyatt shouldn't have been up to that level. But, bro, I agree with you. The stops and starts. I mean, bro, I'll never forget. I tuned in one week, and the Eater of Souls was like running away from people. And I know what that goes down to, Sam, is, I don't know how well you know Vince, but that goes down to Vince, you know, baby faces do this and heels do that, and heels run. But what happened was in 2016, exactly what you said. You see a guy like Bray Wyatt, I'm going to eat your soul. I got the great freaking entrance. I got the great look. I cut a hell of a promo, but then you're running from people because you're a heel. So, like, yeah, I mean, I think that is the one character that really, really stands out. What do you think about the in-ring work, Sam? Because that's where I'm very vocal as well, because I was always into the psychology of the match where you believed the fight was real. I think that has transitioned into spot, no selling, nauseating amount of kickouts. And to me, the psychology of the match has lost a lot over the years. How do you look at the matches today?
I don't mind the matches today, to tell you the truth, because I think the matches today appeal to a generation with a shorter attention span. I think that younger people, and I don't just mean kids, I mean teenagers and people in their 20s, don't necessarily have the patience that maybe you and I would to see a story being told in the ring the way it used to be. And I think that there are still stories being told. They're just being told at a much quicker pace. And while no, it's not believable, I also think that we're a couple generations removed from the idea of wrestling needs to be believable. I think if it looks like a kind of like a stunt show or like a dance a little bit, as long as it's physical and as long as it's like, I can't do that, that looked like it hurt, and there is some story being told, I think it's okay. Because I when I was a kid, if I watched wrestling from the 50s or 60s and it was all kind of hip tosses and arm bars, I'd be like, I can't watch this. This is slow. What is this? And I think if you go back to if you went back to some of the 90s kind of match styles before it got, kind of hardcore and all that stuff, I don't know that people would have the patience for it right now. And that's the way everything kind of works. Again, it's a reflection of the culture. You see more quick, YouTube hits, this, that, quick cuts. People don't even have the patience. When you watch a YouTuber, for instance, famous YouTubers, generally speaking, they don't speak to the camera for 8 minutes straight and you just listen to them. If it's an 8-minute video, every 15 seconds or so, there's a cut. And even though you're cutting to the same face, they're just cutting out dead spaces. And somebody might say, well, how are you supposed to get a message across that way? You're not getting the sort of, you're not sucking people in with the way people can speak. But maybe people watch things in a different way. So I think I'm okay with the in-ring style having adapted to a kind of shorter attention span generation. The thing that I wish were a little different was I feel like I'm getting a lot of the pay-per-view matches before the pay-per-view. So they're like that thing of wanting that. Like I was kind of confused as to why the Rusev Roman Reigns match as a match had to happen last night when it's happening on Sunday. I felt like if you could still have Rusev kick Roman Reigns' ass or have Roman look heroic some other way than actually straight up have the match that you're then again going to have on Sunday.
I actually felt that a lot like at WrestleMania, because you're waiting for these big matches at WrestleMania. But then as I'm sitting there and I'm watching the matches, I'm like, wait a minute. We've seen these people work together like so many times. And a lot of them felt like just another match. And, again, to me, like that's just all in the writing, that's just all in the creative.
But I also think that that's how like your generation changed TV, because when you were in charge of Raw and then moved on to Nitro, it was kind of like every show had to have these main events and it was no more squash match, and then one. It was like, okay, now we're in a business that's run around TV ratings, which wasn't the case before.
Right.
So I think that also conditioned the audience, the more casual audience, to say, okay, Raw means big matches every week, and now it's 3 hours, so 3 hours of big matches. So I think it's also a little difficult to then scale it. You can't, once you push it forward, it's real tough to scale it back, you know?
Yeah. Without, Sam, you make a lot of sense. I like listening to you talk, and that's why I wanted to do this show with you, because I want to start talking about Sam Roberts now, because you got to school me on a couple of things, because I'm very impressed by you.
Oh, thanks.
Now, Sam, I tried to get as much info from you as possible, and I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, did you start as an intern on Opie and Anthony?
Yeah. Fresh out of college. Not even out of college yet. Right before my senior year of college, I was an intern on Opie and Anthony.
Now, Sam, let me ask you, because this kind of happened to me. Like, I'm into podcasting now, but I got into the wrestling business 1991. I started on the radio. And this happened to me, and I know this happened to a lot of people in radio and podcasting. Bro, like, I don't know if too many people, especially today, that have the ambition of, oh, I want to be on the radio. But like, what seems to happen is somehow, some way, you wind up in radio, but you kind of fall in love with radio and you really enjoy radio, which led to me podcasting 25 years later. Were you one of those guys? I mean, I can't imagine, like, in college, you know, your dream is to go on radio when, you know, slowly but surely that's becoming a dying breed. Did you happen to hook on with Opie and Anthony and just fall in love with it?
Well, it's interesting because I listened to Howard Stern and Opie and Anthony throughout high school. Like, that was my morning was Howard, afternoons Opie and Anthony. So, but I wasn't, besides those two shows, I wasn't a radio geek. Like, I didn't know anything. You know, everything else was just some jock, you know, and music and stuff. Those were my two shows, though, and I was, you know, pretty obsessed with both of them. But it never occurred to me to go on the radio. Number one, I didn't know how it was done, but number two, I didn't even think that was a thing that somebody did, you know. But in college, I started doing college radio shows because it just seemed like a fun thing, and it's just like you could just have a show. Now, I was on at like 4 o'clock in the morning, but I could go on. I could, you know, be a goofball and do from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. You know, nobody's listening except my parents, but you got a microphone. You got a perceived audience, whether you have one or not. Right. And you could just kind of go. And that's where I started, like, getting into it. And then I said, okay. And I started just wanting to figure out if I like this and wanting to learn more about it. I started to want it. Same thing as wrestling. I want to get closer to the bubble. So I started sending out college radio tapes and resumes to all the New York stations. That was my junior year at Syracuse. Of like, I want to intern for you this summer. I want to intern for you this summer. Where
were you from, Sam, if you don't mind me interrupting? Where are you from?
Westchester, New York.
You're from Westchester, okay. And yep. you went to school in Sarah. You know, that's funny. I got to ask you this, Sam, and I don't mean to interrupt you, and I definitely want you to go on with your story, but I've been a Stern guy since freaking, bro. I think the first time I turned on the radio and heard him was 83 on WNBC. Bro, I was never privy to Opie and Anthony and Opie. Like, where did you find them growing up in New York?
I got to tell you, like, and maybe it was when you were in the wrestling bubble, so you were less aware of what was happening. But in the late 90s, they blew up. Like, in the late 90s in New York, Opie and Anthony were like
I was out of radio by then. Yeah,
right. So it was like 97, 98, I think, 98, 99. They had this 2-year run on WNEW when they were doing afternoons, and they were the biggest thing, like to the point where they were giving Stern a run for his money. That's why when they got fired, because they were the most outrageous thing, and it goes back to, you know, the Attitude Era being a reflection of the culture. That was when radio was outrageous, and there was nothing more outrageous than Opie and Anthony. So for a 16, 17-year-old kid, it's the greatest thing in the world, you know? Mm-hmm. You get to hear, you know, they're just, you know, naked women on the radio doing crazy things and this and that and pushing the envelope farther than anyone's ever pushed. And, you know, pedophile parody songs on regular radio. It's like you've never heard anything like this. So that's when, and they blew up and they were huge in New York.
So is that, so you said you sent out all your resumes, but is that who you had the target on?
As a matter of yeah. I mean, I sent it to Stern, Wendy Williams, Opie and Anthony, Z100, and probably a couple other ones. But at that point in my life, and that was when Opie and Anthony had first got to XM. At that point, yeah, that was my show for sure.
So you get, again, I'm not familiar with Opie and Anthony. I just was, like you said, I wasn't around in radio during that era, you know, and I've always been a Stern guy. But I would assume. Mm-hmm. With the type of show you're telling me about being an intern, you are much like an intern, like obviously the interns we know by name on the Stern Show. I mean, so you became a part of the group more or less, correct?
Right. Like I was, timing was good because it was early in the XM run. So that meant that they were looking for stuff, like they were rebuilding a show because they had gotten fired 2 years before and they were thrown, they weren't released from their contract. So they were so big that they got fired for a stunt that they did. And then they still paid them, I mean, millions of dollars, because they didn't want them to go back on the radio, because they didn't want to compete with, they didn't want them competing with Stern on a morning show on another channel. So they just kept them. They just kept them on the bench for 2.5 years. They came back, they were rebuilding, and I was like the second or third class of interns. But yeah, but that was also, I mean, I was very aware of that. And I'd been listening to both shows for a long time. And like, you know, the weeks leading up to my internship, I was just spending hours going online and finding tape of interns that had been on the air with Opie and Anthony. I've been like, okay, who succeeded? Who failed? What am I going to do here? Blah, 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 blah. And just kind of getting as close to it before I got there as I could. And fighting for airtime, fighting for attention. And the real secret is doing everything I possibly could at the highest possible level, because that's what people don't do, right? Like they just fight for airtime, but then they're schlubs when it comes to actually doing work, which really means you're not providing value. Like that was that's the two steps: provide value behind the scenes and on the air. And if I could provide value in both spots, then I figured I'd carve out a nice niche for myself.
So now how do we parlay that into the Sam Roberts show years following?
Well, so I did my internship. I went back to Syracuse, but they loved me when I did my internship, and they were like, you got to stick around. And I was like, okay. And I was willing to work for free at that point. I'm 21, 22, whatever. But I can't drop out of school because I can't live at home. They're going to charge me rent if I drop out of school. And if I'm working for free, I'm not going to be able to pay rent. So I switched around all my classes to make sure I could get out that year of Syracuse. I got out with a sociology degree because that's what I could throw together.
That's interesting, bro. We're going to go out of, we're going to work safaris.
Yeah. And throughout that whole senior year, I was going back and forth from Syracuse to New York City, just jumping in, working for free for a day, for a week, whatever I could get done. So then that summer, I left Syracuse, started working for free again. Eventually, they hired me as an associate producer. Then I kept, same strategy, provide value on air and off air, promoted to producer. Eventually, I start doing their after show, start doing their pre-show, just, getting an on-air presence, but building shows around them. I made it clear that this is what I wanted to do was my own show. I started doing my own shows on the weekend independently. I got promoted to executive producer of their show, so I was running their show. And then a year and a half ago, I was finally able to help find people to come in to replace me so I could go off and do an independent thing, which I'd been, working on for 11 years. So that was Sam Roberts' show.
Now, Sam, that's interesting to me. And I'll tell you why. And I listening to that story, I give a lot of credit to, Opie and Anthony, because I'm going to equate this to the wrestling world now. Okay. Usually how it works is when an very talented up and comer arrives on the scene, wrestling is I got to protect my spot. I got to protect my spot. A Vince Russo would not happen today. The only reason a Vince Russo happened was because of the protection of a Vince McMahon. Years after that, when I went to WCW and when I went to TNA, they're always trying to cock block Vince Russo because he's very good at what he does and he's a threat to their position. So like when I hear your story, I'm thinking of Opie and Anthony sitting there saying, we gotta hold this kid down. We gotta hold this kid's gonna take over our show. This kid's gonna take over our show. But much to their credit, it sounds like it was the complete opposite. Now, was that an exception to the rule of how radio is?
Yeah, I mean, thank God that's the show I ended up with, because I can't tell you, I don't think that this story happens with any other big name on the radio. It is not a friendly business. So, thank God I was able to be on a show where they were able to let me shine. And by the way, that's part of that's why I had to make sure I provided value behind the scenes to Opie and to Anthony and say, guys, I am not here to like take your spot. I'm here to help. I want to use my energy to grow and build with you. And I think that's part of the reason that I was able to maintain, is because just consistently, as much as I was doing independent stuff and pushing myself forward, I never let it overshadow what I was doing for them.
But you know what else that is, Sam? I'll tell you right now, because I've lived through this a million times. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is also like take an Opie and an Anthony. But I would also have to think, with guys like that, to allow you to grow, there has to be a confidence level in themselves where they say, okay, kid, you think you're better than me, bring it. And that's why I love people like that, because if you have that kind of an attitude, it's going to make you better.
Yeah.
But the normal person in business doesn't have that attitude. You become a threat. The next thing we know, we got to squash you over here because we got to protect my spot. So that's why when I hear the story, man, I could kind of tell the type of human beings they are.
And Opie especially has never had a fear of talented people. Opie has always been good and smart about knowing that he's got this show. He's built this brand. And the more talented people he can keep around him,
makes himself look better. Man, it makes himself look better.
And the more successful I get independently, I'm not going to go around and pretend that this didn't all come from, working with Opie and Anthony. Like I would think that they're smart enough to know that any success that I'm able to get is only ever going to make them look better for kind of grooming me, right?
Yeah, but you also got to know, Sam, especially the business you're in, that's the exception to the rule.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you when you talk about being at the right place at the right time, because that happens a lot in wrestling, and I tell the wrestlers this all the time, bro, it's not about how talented they are. Like, there's only so much they can control. Like, I tell a story all the time, and I'm not going to mention any names here, but I introduced an executive to a wrestler for the first time. Mm-hmm. The wrestler was very nervous, Sam. He could not look in the exec's face. And I knew it was because the wrestler was nervous. From that point on, the executive never wanted to book the wrestler because he couldn't trust him because he didn't look in his eye. So like that one conversation literally cost this guy almost his career. And that's what I tell wrestlers all the time. You can only control what happens when the camera's on you. That's the only thing you can control. Outside of that, Sam, I want to ask you this. You come across as a very nice guy, and I've only been listening to your show a little bit now because I just got introduced to you. But, Sam, part of what you do, obviously, is like you have to be a critic. And I know that's part of what I do, bro. I'm a critic based on my experience. But, I really try very, very, very hard not to make it personal. I always try to make it professional, but regardless, bro, if you say something about somebody's professional work, they're going to take it personally. You seem like such a nice guy. You seem like a guy that a lot of people like. Do you run into, first of all, do you ever bury anybody? And is it hard for you, like, if I really want to say something, but maybe my personality won't allow me to say it? And again, like, I'm just judging you based on this conversation and based on what I see in you, or am I way off base?
Well, no, you're right. I don't like to, I don't really, I'll tell you when I do bury people, but I don't like to do it often, and I don't like to go over the top with criticisms, even though it's good for ratings a lot of times, because you can be wrong, right? Like, before I go on the attack, I need to know that I'm right. If I see something on Raw that I don't like this week, I'm not going to like lose my mind attacking it, because if they correct it next week, all that energy was wasted. You know what I mean? I go,
well, Sam, you could say they corrected it because of your rant. You could take credit for it. You know what I mean?
That's true, and I'm sure I've done that in the past. But I will only and you know, I do a show every night, so you know, politicians and mainstream stuff. I'm criticizing people all the time, and I've certainly made enemies because of stuff that I've said on the air. You know, I will only bury somebody if they publicly go on the attack against me. Yeah, so I would say that I don't like to go after people. I have the ability to, and I can do it pretty well. And you know, like I've made fun of people kind of in a joking way where people have taken it personally for sure, especially being on like Opie and Anthony and stuff like that. But I don't go nuclear on anybody unless they're attacking me in some kind of public way. Like
have you ever had to go nuclear on anybody?
Yeah. I've had my enemies in the past. You know the actor Kevin Pollak?
Of course, sure. Yep.
I mean, we're complete enemies. I mean, I've gone nuclear on him,
bro.
Many times.
Sam, I got to tell you, I find it hard to find you're an enemy with anybody. But when you say Pollak, the first thing that comes to my mind, obviously, I've never spoken to the guy, is this may be a guy that takes himself a little bit too seriously.
Yeah. And you know what it was? He was listening to the radio, and he went on a couple of different podcasts out of nowhere and just started mentioning me and how much he didn't like me and how bad my voice was and how it makes him want to kill himself and turn off the radio. And I went,
but
okay.
That's great. But you had to be thinking that's great pub for me, no?
No, I was. And the idea that I can go on the attack on somebody, especially a high profile person like Pollak, is like perfect, great, awesome.
Yeah, because that's funny because, Sam, now that I'm on Podcast One, like, bro, I know purposely there are some dirt sheet writers that talk about me and bury me because they know, like, you know, I'm a New Yorker, bro, and if you talk smack about me, I'm going to freaking bury you. But I have to stop myself because I'm not going to put them over on freaking Podcast One. Are you kidding? I fall right into the trap. But now, bro, if a celebrity wants to go toe-to-toe with me, I'm in, bro.
That's the key, is finding somebody who's above you.
Right.
That's going at, and then you never want to punch down. You always want to punch up.
That's
always
right.
Punch up.
Yeah. So, and anybody else have you been at war with, Sam?
Well, it's not really a war. I didn't go nuclear, but Chris Jericho blocked me on Twitter.
Really? Interesting. Now, how did that happen?
Well, I've known Chris for like a long time because he's done radio and he's always got projects going on. So I've known him for years, and I don't know if it's a joke. I don't know what it is. One of our mutual friends said it was definitely not a joke. And I went, I don't know what's going on, because some guy had a troll Twitter account. I actually thought it was funny because I looked at this guy's Twitter account and literally all he did was tweet wrestlers and say somebody saying bad things about you. And it's all made up. It's all make-believe.
That just happened to me, bro. That just happened to me. This guy, you know, said, hey, to Sonny, Medusa, and Bruce Pritchard, this guy went on to, hey, did you guys know that Vince Russo said so-and-so to you? And, bro, they all freaking bought into it.
I don't believe it. It's like they don't check. They don't research. Yeah. That's why I don't go on the attack. Like if somebody says, oh, so-and-so was talking about you on the radio today, find me the tapes. Find me the tapes because I got to hear it.
Bro, they bought into it. Sonny starts, you know, cussing me out on Twitter. I'm like, Sonny, I never. Yeah. So that you think that happened to you with Jericho?
So he sends this tweet to Jericho, and it's a quote, and it says, in quotations, the Chris Jericho AJ Styles WrestleMania match is the worst build to a Chris Jericho match of all time, or something like that. And I mean, like literally, I don't even know if I broached the topic, but it was like every word was made up. It was just out of thin air. And I see this tweet go out, and then I see I've got a tweet from Jericho, and it says something like, hey, Sam, nice afro, stupid, shut up. And I go, oh, that's funny. Like I was like, oh, I like that Jericho told me to shut up and made fun of me a little bit. Like, great. And then I click on Jericho's, I try to reply to Jericho, and it says you can't. And I go,
the worst, right?
I go, what happened? What happened?
Wow.
And yeah, and I didn't.
Yeah.
And so
that's a little,
I don't know.
If he did that, that's a little touchy, though, bro. In my opinion, you know.
Yeah. So, hopefully at some point, I'm sure that he'll have a project to promote at some point. So he'll come to Sirius like he's done before.
Yeah.
And I want to be it's a conversation I'm dying to have on the air.
Yeah, bro, I've been blocked by Kevin Owens because, I've said on more occasions than one, I think the guy could get in better shape. So, I got blocked for that. But so, listen, Sam, let me ask you this. I got a couple more questions here I want to ask you. Now, bro, you've interviewed big hitters, and these are the big hitters I'm talking about. You can go to Sam's website, notsam.com. And there are pictures of him with Taylor Swift. There are pictures of him with Kanye West. I mean, he's been around the biggies. Now, without burying anybody, Sam, can you – and, bro, I'm a huge TMZ mark. Bro, I'm a huge entertainment mark, huge. I love entertainment, always have. Without burying anybody, who have been some of the nicest celebrities that you've ever interviewed or worked with, and who have been some of the people that, let's just say, maybe not so nice?
I got some of my favorite interviews, like William H. Macy. Such a fun guy to talk to, and he's just such a grounded guy. He's not people talk about William H. Macy as one of the great actors of this generation.
Yeah.
And he doesn't carry himself that way at all. It's the people I've never really had a terrible time with anybody. I had a tough time with Denise Richards, for example, which is we didn't click. She started looking at her publicist. I couldn't ask any questions that were right. And it was come on.
Sam, do you get affected, bro? Maybe this was part of the Denise Richards. Because, bro, I know sometimes, I'm like the Ralph Cramden, the hum. Bro, when I have a really hot girl on the show, now I know you've got hot girls as part of the show. That's different. But when I have a really hot guest female on my show and I'm taken back by the beauty, bro, that sometimes throws me off my game a little bit. You think that could have happened with you and Denise Richards, or it does, whether it's a gorgeous girl or William, Macy, you conduct the same interview?
I definitely don't conduct the same interview, but I have to I always prepare myself for that, because the hot girl effect, I hear it when I hear other people doing interviews, and I think it's embarrassing, and I can't.
Yeah, bro, don't ever listen to me interview a hot chick then. But go ahead.
But I'll get to this place where I am so far out of the realm of possibility of having a shot with this person that it's just I'm just gonna go for broke. I could be a fool. I can flirt if I want. Nothing matters. Even if I was on my A game of the best I've ever been, it's never gonna happen.
Yeah.
So. Once that's taken off the table.
Yeah, I get away with it because I play. Listen, I'm 55 years old and I've been married for 33 years. So I'm no, I'm no threat. I'm no this, I'm no that. And then I get to big quotations because I use that. But I like your approach too. But the Denise things were just not clicking there.
Yeah, I don't remember. I think I was asking. It was one of those things where she probably just wanted to talk about her project that she was promoting. And anytime an actor or a musician is just well, we're just here to talk about the project. I'm it's not an infomercial, It's an interview. It's
you've got an audience, bro.
And if you want to sell your project, if you want to sell a project, the best thing you can do is get somebody to fall in love with you. And then they're going to see okay, I want to see what he's doing. They're not going to, if you're just on talking about your movie for 20 minutes, it's boring. It's I'm turning it off. I'm not going to see the movie.
Yeah. Now I saw you. I want to ask you a couple of these pictures I saw. I saw you getting your picture taken with Kanye.
Yeah.
Bro, obviously I've never met Kanye West. And bro, I don't say this about too many people, but I look at him and I don't like him. Bro, one of my biggest pet peeves in life is when somebody just thinks they're better than somebody else. I don't believe in that. I believe we're all in this mess together. I don't care who you are. Everybody's my equal. That's how I look at it. He's just one of these guys that to me, he thinks he's so much better than everybody else. Am I 100% wrong about this guy?
I can't say you're wrong about that. And I don't know him well at all. But the thing, like, for me, I have a tendency of just taking people as they are, like kind of just allowing them, like, okay, like what we were talking about, storytelling in wrestling. I know what the parameters are. Now let's live in this reality and see what this person has to offer. Like, for me, I love Kanye West, like everything. Like, I love
what am
all
I
of his
missing then?
music.
Tell me why. What? Because I'm the complete op. What am I not saying, Sam?
Well, I love all his music, first of all. Maybe that's just not your cup of tea. I don't know. But I love the idea that he thinks he's the best at what he does and he's better than people, and he just says it. I think there are a lot of people who think that they're better than other people. And I'm sure that there are people that you think that you're better than, and I'm sure there are people that you are better than. But you're not going to say it, right? Because that's not polite, because that's not the image you want to put out there, because for whatever reason. And Kanye is in this kind of crazy manic place so often where he's just being honest to himself, and whether what he's saying is true or not, the things that are in his head are coming out. And
so
that's
he believes it. I mean,
I believe, yeah, I don't think that this is some grand thing that he's created. I think he truly believes what he's saying, and that might make him unlikable, and maybe you don't like him because of it, but you know not to like him because he's being honest, as opposed to a guy who's sitting there kind of telling you what you want to hear and adapting his personality to you, and you like this guy without realizing that he's snaking you, you know?
Okay. Here's another girl. I want to talk to you about this picture. I'm going to talk to you about two pictures.
Yeah.
Here's another picture, and I'll tell you like what my play on her is. Sam, I love the female singers. Like pop, hard rock. I love female rock and rollers. I always have. And sometimes you get your pop stars, and like all of a sudden they grow into the hot women. Like I put like a Katy Perry in that category. She's the pop star. All of a sudden she's got 38 triple Ds, and it's like where the freak did they come from? Britney Spears the same way, with the pigtails and the schoolgirl. Then all of a sudden, like, she's a freaking knockout. One girl, like, and please, Sam, tell me if I'm wrong. Like, to this day, she comes across to me as like a teenage girl. She's never like quite grown into her body, and I just can't look at her as like a hot woman, because like I see a child, like I see a gawky teenage girl. I don't know, but I saw you with Taylor Swift, and like I don't know what it is about Taylor Swift, but I can't look at Taylor Swift and say, oh, she's a hot pop singer for some reason. What's the deal with her?
Yeah, I mean, she's like very like striking in person because she's tall. She's super tall and lanky. She got like a model thing, but she does have this youth about her, and I think that's part of her appeal, where you feel like she's the first girl you had a crush on in high school. But you get to a certain age, and you don't want to be dating a girl from high school.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But I don't think that's who she's appealing to. I think that's part of being a teeny bopper. And that's why she's managed to maintain that sort of teeny bopperness, because that's the appeal of her. But the Taylor Swift thing, when I interviewed her, it was because I did this bit for Opie and Anthony for a while, because they started complaining about not getting big guests because they're a controversial show. And so they're like, big guests won't do our show. These big guests come into Sirius, they won't do our show. They won't do our show. So I thought of this idea where I would talk to the talent bookers at Sirius XM. And I would say, let me talk to if a giant star was coming in, I'd say, please, all I need is 10 seconds with them. They're doing 3 shows. They're up here for an hour and a half. 10 seconds. Let me ask one question. No controversy. They will have a good time. They'll smile after it. Everybody will be happy, please. And they started letting me doing it. And so I did this bit called One Question with a Guest We Couldn't Get. And it would literally be like mundane. Like for Taylor Swift, it would be like this whole big buildup, and we build production around it. And there'd be horns and trumpets and the whole deal. And it would be Opie and Anthony Show presents Sam Roberts and One Question with a Guest We Couldn't Get. And so it's this thing. What's the one question? What's the one question? And it would be me, and I'd go, "Hi, I'm Sam Roberts here with Taylor Swift. Taylor, do you like grapes?" And she'd go, "Yes." And I go, "Thank you for your time." And that'd be the whole. That's it. That's
brilliant.
The whole thing.
That is freaking brilliant, Sam. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got to ask you about this guy because I had the absolute honor, pleasure, whatever you want to call it, of working with him. Bro, I don't know why I was one of the few guys that actually got along with him and, more importantly, actually understood him, because that was the problem. He was so misunderstood. When you don't understand somebody, you immediately don't like them. I saw a picture of you and Warrior, Jim Hellwig. Did you get to interview Warrior?
Yeah, that was actually a great story. I was so glad I did, and I was so glad I met him, because I sit down, and that was another thing where I was doing for a while, and I do it a little bit still, but it's kind of just like a kitschy thing. Like for a while when I was younger, and I would only get 3 or 4 minutes with wrestlers, I would start every interview by asking, "What's the haps?" And it was just such a stupid thing to say. And every single person would be like, what do you mean? What? That's a terrible. And it was just a thing, It became this thing that made you unique. And so Warrior was doing a thing with 2K, and we were like, we got there. We didn't know what was happening, so we got there day of. I was like, please. I did the same spiel. All I need is 30 seconds. I'll ask him about the game, whatever you want. I just need one question, because all I wanted to do was ask him what's the haps. And so they were like, okay, 30 seconds. We can give you 30 seconds. And so I asked him, what's the haps? And he was kind of like annoyed by it, I could tell, which is okay. And I, kind of weasel my way out of it or whatever. But then I look around the room and nobody was stopping me. Like nobody was telling me my 30 seconds was up. So I was like, I'm going until somebody until I see some guy in a suit, waving his finger, like I'm going to keep going. So I ended up getting him for 9 or 10 minutes or something. And it was like a solid, every question could be my last question, 9 or 10 minutes. And I was like, I thought it was great. And I had such a good time. And he was honest and he was smart and the whole thing. And what really made it worthwhile was that was probably in April or May.
Right before he passed.
But that August, that was when he was doing the 2K video game. That August, he was in town for SummerSlam to do 2K promotion. This was before Hall of Fame. And they do a thing where we're going to do a brunch and the Warrior's going to speak and then you can take a photo with him. And it's like, okay. And so my wife was with me and I was like, you know what? I already took a photo with him. I already met him and everything, but let's get online with the other press people, because I think it'd be funny to get a photo of you, my wife, with the Warrior. I'd get a kick out of that. And so we get online and we're waiting and waiting and waiting. And we get to Warrior. And he just looks over at me and he goes, Sam, what's the haps?
Oh, wow. What about that, huh, bro? Is that great or what?
It blew my mind that this 10-minute conversation. And he goes, I talked to my daughter after that interview. She explained the haps and everything to me. And I was like, wow.
Oh, that's
the guy. It made my day. It made everything.
Bro, who's the one person that who's number one on the wish list? Who do you want to interview that you just have not for whatever reason? Who's number one?
Well, living or dead is Macho Man, which is a shame because he was my favorite of all time and I can't imagine the stories. But living, I think, is the better question. And the person I'd like to sit down, no restrictions, an hour, 2 hours, however long I want, is Undertaker. I've never spoken to him, never taken a photo with him, never met him. I shared an elevator with him once, but that's as close as it's ever come.
I got to interview both of those guys. Bro, Savage, very, very guarded, very, very old school. And bro, what I noticed was when I started interviewing him, I couldn't get nothing out of him, bro. And I don't bring wrestlers on the show that I know are going to work me. Stop already. You're not working me. I've got an audience. There's a bunch of them like that I won't even contact. But Savage was very, very guarded. But I noticed, bro, while I was interviewing him, he was down in the beers. And the more he drank and the more he opened up. And, I finally got it. And then I finally got him to open up. Taker is very guarded too, but for different reasons. Randy was guarded. I want to protect the business. Take is more guarded because he's a really shy guy. You know, I mean, you really have to get in his world, you know, to get to know him. But I mean, I was lucky, bro. I mean, those were those were great experiences for me. Can you give me some advice now, Sam?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
You got a 55-year-old man coming to a 32-year-old kid for advice. You understand where I'm coming from? I got to ask you this. I want to ask you a couple things. First of all, Sam, I really am. Everybody knows me from wrestling. I got a 25-year resume in wrestling. So everybody expects that from me. My problem is this. I don't enjoy wrestling like I used to. I just don't. I mean, not a knock at wrestling. I don't enjoy it like I used to. I haven't enjoyed it for a long time. So I'm trying to get away from wrestling more mainstream, but like they expect wrestling from me. So do you think like it's impossible of what I'm trying to do because I'm so identifiable with wrestling? Or is there something more I could be doing to make the transition? What kind of advice would you give me, Sam?
Well, it's really tough for a few reasons. Number one, you're responsible for some of the storylines in, I would say, inarguably the most popular era in wrestling history. Number two, after that, you became an on-screen character. So people now know you, and they know the name, and they know everything. You went, you know, if you had just done the WWE writer stuff, then there'd be some people that didn't know your name, didn't know your face. It would just be, but the minute the headline read Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara signed to WCW, because as a wrestling fan, I said, wait a minute, the writers are part of this war? Like, that was the moment that it became this thing where, and honestly, that might be the moment where the wrestling audience became conscious of the writers. You know, that might be that, but regardless, I think what you would have to do is, number one, sacrifice the audience, because you're going to lose a lot of the audience that you have because they're a wrestling audience, and a wrestling audience is a wrestling audience, and that's what it is. Number two, you would have to create something, and it would have to be something that garnered its own audience of people that have no idea that you ever did anything before. That's what it would have to be, you know, and that's very difficult.
So, Sam, you're telling me basically I don't have a snowball's chance in hell. Is that basically what you're saying, Sam?
Unless you'd have to go back to the, you know, pre-Vic Venom days. Like, you'd have to go back to like starting from scratch.
Oh, okay. You just bursted my bubble. All right, Sam, let me ask you about this. Sam, you got a wrestling podcast on that. Now the podcast, I want to get it's Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. That's the name of it, right?
Right.
Now we could download that on iTunes, correct?
Yes.
Sam, answer me this honestly. Honestly, because I know you're still a fan and you really haven't lost much of the luster, which is great. But Sam, do you ever sit there and like watch? See, this is what bothers me. Like, I'll be sitting there watching a 3-hour Raw, Sam, and like once we get through the 2-hour mark, now asking myself, what the frig am I going to talk about? Like they give me very little to talk about. So now I've got to do a review show, and I'm like, what am I possibly going to talk about on this show? The Nia Jax squash match, do you run into that, Sam, or can you still find interesting topics to talk about when you watch Raw?
Yeah, see, so I do it once a week, so it's not so contingent on just being a Raw review, because I have run into troubles with that, where I'll watch Raw and SmackDown and go, I don't have that much to say about it, and when that happens, it's like, okay, well, if I don't have that much to say about it, well, what needs to be improved? And I'll try to think of just a different topic then, where I'm going, okay, here's what the WWE needs to do, or here's what's on the WWE network, or here's how you make this a bigger thing, or you know what I would do? Go into fantasy booking world, or do something that's still along the lines of talking about what's going on in wrestling right now, and maybe acknowledge a little, like, look, not too much happened on Raw and SmackDown, but here's what I like, and let that be a gateway into a bigger conversation about stuff that didn't happen on the TV show.
That's a good point. Yeah. Now, Sam, let me ask you this: 32 years, you've accomplished so much, and we're going to tell everybody where they can find you. You know, like I've got a bigger audience than you. Like they don't know. But my question is, bro, like, do you have an end game, Sam? Is there an ultimate goal? Is it like, would I like to be a wrestling booker? Would I like to someday have my own talk show on TV? Being that you've accomplished so much at such a young age, is there a big goal out there for you?
No, I mean, because I had goals when I was younger, but then I kind of came to terms with the fact that puts a cap on it. You know what I mean? Like there is no right now. I'm sure I'll feel different when I'm older and tired, but right now there isn't anything that I want to say, okay, once I hit that, then I'm done, then I've done it. Like, it's just a matter of keeping going up and up and up. If I had unlimited funds, if I won the lottery, I'd be a blast to open a wrestling promotion and try to, you know, see if my creative ideas that I think are so great would actually work. Sure, and figure all that out. But that would be so far in the distance. Like, I'll never... If I am able to save up $1 million, I'll never use that $1 million to start a wrestling thing, because it just doesn't make sense. Like I'm future-minded. So no, I mean, I'd like to just keep growing and growing and growing. And I also think that media in general has become so unpredictable that if I set my sights on becoming a TV talk show host, and in 10 years that's not a viable medium anymore, and I've spent a lot of time.
Well, that's a great point, bro. Yeah. Well, Sam, listen, I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Now, what side of the fence am I on? If somebody says to you, Sam, you're on Vince Russo's show, do we love the guy or do we hate the guy? What's based on this conversation, Sam? What side of the fence are we sitting on?
I like you. You're very respectful to me. You blew me up. Like everything. It was awesome. And I'll tell you this: the reason that I reached out to you initially was because I watched your like YouTube videos and stuff that you posted, and I do want to give you credit because you pitched on the videos where you're at the wrestling school and you're trying to explain psychology to the kids and everything.
Yeah.
You pitched a Tiny Tim character.
Don't tell me you're a big Tiny Tim mark, bro.
I became familiar with Tiny Tim from WWF in '93 when he was doing the thing with Lawler, and I started to just become fascinated with him. And when you pitch that character and how it's kind of crazy, but then it goes back to being happy, and it's got the ukulele, I'm like, I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Bro, what about if we pitch that for you to the WWE?
My hair goes out. I feel like it needs to be down. You know, it has, and also you kind of need that kind of hulking, brooding. You know, I'm unfamiliar with my own strength, and I don't want to hurt anybody, but I just destroyed this person thing. You know,
Sam, I love the fact that you mentioned Tiny Tim. Sam, to me, he was the all-time greatest character I've ever witnessed in my life. I don't think there's a better character than Tiny Tim.
But especially since he lived it.
He lived it. But, Sam, I got to say this. I asked you specifically about love or hate, what side of the fence, and you said, I like you. You didn't commit to the full-blown love. Like,
well, you know that I said I wouldn't bury somebody if I didn't know, like if I didn't have all the evidence. I feel like we're starting a great connection.
A great relay. Yeah, so in other words, you want to make sure I'm not working you.
Exactly.
Okay, I understand that. All right, Sam, I'm going to read down your credentials. Like, I need to plug you with everything you do and all your followers, but I'm going to do that anyway. We can listen to Sam on Opie Radio. That's on Sirius Radio, the Sam Roberts Show, correct?
Right.
All right, we have the Sam Roberts Wrestling Podcast. That's on iTunes, but it's other areas also, correct, Sam? Where else can they get that show?
Right now it's on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and notsam.com.
Notsam.com. YouTube, you got a phenomenal YouTube channel that I went on and checked out a lot of these interviews. And now, do you have an ongoing role with WWE Network, or did they call you when, Sam will fit over here, let's use Sam? Is it that type of a thing?
It's just like, yeah, those like the list and those shows were just clip shows. So they called me up and they were like, oh, you know, come on and just, you know, and they knew that they could throw the most obscure wrestling things at me and I just have some goofy thing to say about it. So there's that. And then I think I could say it. I'll be on an episode of Holy Foley.
Oh, good season. For you, bro. Well, yeah, you're not too far from him in Westchester. He's still living out on the island, right?
Yeah, and Mick and Noel came up and did Sam Roberts' show for the reality show. And
also, Sam, you mentioned the .com. It's notsam.com, and at Twitter you're at notsam, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, Sam, I had a great time. I had a blast. I'd love to do this again. You know, whenever you have time, bro, anything you ever want to talk about, you know, please let me know. Because, again, there are a lot of things I like to talk about. Like I saw you and Elton John. I'm sure that's a whole story we didn't get into. A lot of things I want to discuss. But I do appreciate you coming on my show. I really enjoyed the conversation.
I really appreciate you having me on, too. And I'm going to definitely, when you have time, have you on my show. And we'll just talk about wrestling.
Let me end it with this. I'm looking behind you. You got a child's room, such as myself. What is your favorite WWE action figure, your prized possession behind that shelf?
Well, those are all the new ones. Like, those are all the current, like, era stuff. I think that my most prized possession, I have a complete collection over there, you can't see it, of the original Tonka wrestling buddies. All 8,
wow.
Not the first 4, all 8.
That's unbelievable.
So
wow.
I love those. Yeah.
Now, Sam, are those played with, or are they in their original packaging?
They're opened. I don't play with them, but WWE found out that I had the whole set, so they did reach out to me. And when they did one of those clip shows about like wacky merchandise, they asked me to make a video playing with the wrestling buddies. So I was like, oh, okay, and I sent them like a minute and a half, and they used almost all the footage. It's embarrassing beyond belief.
Bro, can I see if I can name all 8?
Yeah, go for it.
And then we're done. Hulk Hogan.
Yep.
Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Savage.
Yep.
For some reason, I'm thinking there was a Boss Man wrestling buddy.
There you go. That's in Series 2, yes.
4. I don't see him as a wrestling buddy, but I got to guess Piper.
Incorrect.
Okay, tell me who the last 4 were.
DiBiase, Jake Roberts, and Hawk and Animal. Legion of Doom.
Both of them got a doll. Hawk and Animal. Wow, weren't they the big deals?
Yeah.
Well, Sam Roberts, thanks for joining me. And everybody, you can listen to Sam every day. Opie Radio, Sirius Radio, The Sam Roberts Show. Thanks for joining us here today on The Swerve, man.
Thank you.
It's right about time again to swerve again, confuse the general fans again. Add another swerve and then put it on a poll again. Put it on a poll again. Put it on the poll again. And our square to quad is gonna get emotional as I wait to overbook the damn cards.